The air in the Midtown Manhattan lobby of Innovatech Solutions was usually as cold and sterile as the marble floors and glass walls that defined it. It was a space designed to communicate silent, unshakable power, but today that silence was shattered. A frantic energy pulsed through the building, a controlled chaos that betrayed a deep and costly failure. Men and women in tailored suits moved with a clipped urgency, their hushed conversations sharp with anxiety. On the technology floor, the heart of the operation, a team of the brightest engineers in the city stared at a wall of monitors, their faces illuminated by the angry red glow of system-wide failure alerts. The illusion of impenetrable corporate control was dissolving with every passing minute, each tick of the clock representing another $1 million lost to an invisible enemy they couldn't find. At the center of this storm stood William, the Chief Technology Officer. Dressed in a designer suit that usually amplified his authority, he now looked like a man trapped inside his own expensive armor. The knot of his silk tie was loosened, and a fine layer of sweat glistened on his forehead as he barked orders that led nowhere. He was the architect of this digital kingdom, a leader respected for his vision and decisiveness. Yet, in this moment, he was utterly powerless, a king watching his castle crumble from within. His eyes, darting between the failing screens and the anxious faces of his team, held a flicker of raw panic. He projected the image of a commander rallying his troops, but inwardly, he was consumed by the terrifying prospect of explaining this catastrophic failure to the board. Into this high-stakes theater of desperation walked Maya. She was almost invisible, clad in the simple, worn uniform of a tech courier service, a heavy backpack slung over her shoulder. Her face was etched with the fatigue of long hours and low pay, faint dark circles under her eyes telling a story of relentless work. But those eyes were her most striking feature, incredibly sharp, analytical, and alive with a curiosity that seemed out of place. No one in that room could have known she was an honors graduate in systems engineering from MIT, her brilliant mind languishing in a gig economy job for 10 long months. Her pain wasn't from the physical work, but from the crushing weight of her own wasted potential, a quiet confidence in her abilities that had yet to find a single opportunity to be proven. She was there to deliver a box of expensive server components, a routine drop-off. But as she stood at the entrance to the tech floor, she overheard the frantic talk of a system-wide crash. Her gaze was drawn to the main monitor, where a familiar error code blinked ominously. A bug she had studied obsessively for her senior project. An uncontrollable impulse took over, a mix of a problem-solver's instinct and the gut-wrenching realization that this might be her only chance. Overcoming a wave of fear, she took a step into the room. In a voice that was firm yet respectful, she broke the tension. "Excuse me," she said. "I think I know what the problem is. Seeing someone risk it all like that is what these stories are about. And it's why subscribing helps so much in our mission to share them." The immediate silence that followed her words was heavier than any of the frantic noise that had preceded it. Every head in the room, from the most junior analyst to the chief technology officer, swiveled in her direction. William's face, already tight with stress, hardened into a mask of pure disbelief and irritation. He stared at her as if she were a glitch in his reality. An incomprehensible piece of data that didn't belong. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice sharp and dripping with condescension, each word a hammer blow meant to remind her of her place. "The delivery girl?" A few of the younger engineers exchanged smug glances, relieved to have a target for their own anxieties. The collective judgment in the room was a palpable force, designed to push her right back out the door she had dared to enter. For a heartbeat, his words landed with their intended force. Maya felt a familiar hot flush of shame creep up her neck. It was the same dismissal she had faced in every sterile interview room, the same unspoken message that her worn clothes and lack of corporate polish made her invisible, the weight of her backpack filled with components for a world she couldn't access, suddenly felt immense, pulling her down. She could feel the burn of their stares, each one reinforcing the narrative of her failure. The path of least resistance was clear. Apologize for the interruption, retreat into the anonymity of the hallway, and let this moment dissolve into another painful memory of a chance not taken. The urge to simply disappear was a powerful siren call back to the safety of being overlooked, but then her gaze locked onto the main monitor again, on that single, blinking line of red text. It was more than just an error code to her. It was a ghost she had already wrestled with and defeated. She remembered the cold, fluorescent hum of the university library at 3 a.m., the taste of stale coffee, and the stubborn, obsessive refusal to let this exact problem beat her. She remembered the quiet thrill of the breakthrough, a feeling of pure, unadulterated competence that belonged only to her. That memory was a shield. It was her truth, a fact that their scorn could not erase. She straightened her posture, a small but significant shift, and met William's gaze. The exhaustion in her eyes was still there, but now it was orbited by a focused, analytical fire that seemed to catch him off guard. "I am," she answered, her voice even and devoid of apology. She owned his label, then immediately discarded it. "But I'm also an MIT Systems Engineering graduate, summa cum laude." And that cascading kernel panic on your screen was the central case study for my senior thesis on resource allocation conflicts in proprietary architecture. She delivered the lines without a trace of arrogance, stating them as simple, verifiable facts. The sudden shift in her vocabulary, from courier to expert, was jarring. The technical precision of her diagnosis was a language they all understood, and it silenced the room more effectively than a shout. In the space of a single sentence, she had completely rewritten their perception of her, forcing them to see the mind, not the uniform. William was momentarily speechless, his mind struggling to reconcile the woman in the worn courier uniform with the high-level analyst who had just diagnosed his company's catastrophe. His hand-picked team of six-figure engineers had been throwing complex, jargon-filled theories at the wall for hours, getting nowhere. And now, a delivery driver had just offered a hypothesis more specific and plausible than anything they had come up with. He was standing on the precipice of a career-ending failure, about to explain to the board how his unbreachable fortress had been brought down. Listening to her was an act of pure desperation, an admission that he was out of ideas. It was the absolute bottom, but it was also the only lifeline he could see. He finally broke the silence, the words feeling heavy and unnatural on his tongue. "Show me." It was less an order and more a plea. He gestured to a vacant terminal at the main console, a silent decree that sent a fresh wave of disbelief through his team. They parted for her, their expressions a mixture of resentment and grudging curiosity. As Maya walked forward, the soft squeak of her worn work boots on the marble floor was the only sound in the vast room. She shrugged the heavy backpack from her shoulders, letting it drop to the floor with a soft thud. It was a symbolic act, a shedding of the identity that had trapped her for so long. As she sat down, her hands hovering over the keyboard, she felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced in almost a year. As her fingers began to move, a cold wave of imposter syndrome washed over her. The voice of doubt that had been her constant companion for months began to scream in her mind, "You don't belong here. They're all waiting for you to fail. You're going to confirm you're just the delivery girl who got lucky with a guess." The fear was a physical thing, a tremor in her hands that she fought to control. Each keystroke felt like an act of defiance against the crushing weight of her own insecurities. She could feel the collective gaze of William's team on her back, their silence no longer dismissive, but intensely scrutinizing. She squeezed her eyes shut for a second, took a deep, centering breath, and forced her entire world to shrink to the glowing screen in front of her. A young engineer named David, who had been particularly confident in his own failed attempts to solve the problem, stepped forward. "Sir, with all due respect," he began, aiming his words at William, but fixing his condescending stare on Maya. "We've already run multiple integrity scans on the update logs. They all came back clean. She's wasting what little time we have left." His interruption was a clear power play, an attempt to reassert the established order. He saw her presence not as a potential solution, but as an indictment of his own failure. He was defending his pride, using the shield of protocol and procedure to try and push this outsider, this anomaly, back into her box. Maya didn't turn around. Her eyes remained locked on the lines of code scrolling past. "Your scans were looking for a hostile signature or a corrupted file," she said, her voice remaining steady and professional, her fingers never breaking their rhythm. "This isn't a breach. It's a logic flaw in the memory allocation command. The code is clean, but it's telling the system to do the wrong thing in the right way. You were looking for a burglar when the problem is that the architect's blueprints are wrong." Her explanation was not just a rebuttal, it was a lesson. She disarmed his challenge with superior knowledge, exposing the flaw in their approach without a hint of personal attack. David stepped back, his face flushed, with nothing left to say. William observed the entire exchange, his mind reeling. The initial desperation he felt was slowly being replaced by something else. Profound respect. This young woman, under the most intense pressure imaginable, was a beacon of calm competence. She moved through his billion-dollar digital infrastructure with a native fluency that his own team, for all their experience, clearly lacked. He saw that brief flicker of self-doubt when she first sat down, but he also saw how she mastered it, drawing on a deep well of knowledge rather than ego. He was no longer seeing a courier uniform or a tired face. He was seeing raw, undeniable talent, and he was beginning to understand the colossal mistake he and his entire industry were making every single day. The minutes ticked by, each one an eternity marked by the rhythmic, ominous blink of the red system failure lights. The only other sounds in the room were the soft, rapid clicking of Maya's keyboard and the low hum of the server racks, which now sounded like a countdown to disaster. The financial losses were mounting, a fact that hung in the air like a toxic gas. Maya felt the pressure, but it didn't break her. It focused her. The noise and the anxiety of the room faded into the background. It was just her and the puzzle, a complex language of logic and order that she understood intimately. It's in these moments of intense focus, when someone pours their entire soul into their work, that you witness real character. If you believe these are the kinds of stories worth telling, subscribing to our channel is the most powerful way to help us continue sharing them. She delved deeper into the system, her eyes scanning thousands of lines of code, her mind mapping the intricate pathways of the recent software update. The engineers who had gathered behind her watched in stunned silence. This wasn't the methodical, plodding work of a junior coder following a manual. This was an intuitive dance, a display of analytical prowess that was both brilliant and breathtaking to behold. She wasn't just reading the code, she was interpreting its history, sensing its flaws, and having a silent conversation with the machine itself. Her brow furrowed, a sign of intense concentration as she closed in on the source of the chaos. The atmosphere in the room shifted from tense to electric, a fragile hope beginning to dawn that this impossible stranger was about to save them all. Then, suddenly, she saw it. It wasn't a complex virus or a sophisticated piece of malware, the kind of digital bogeyman Williams' team had been hunting for hours. It was something infinitely smaller, more human, and in its own way, more devastating. A single, misplaced character in a line of code buried deep within the latest software patch. A semicolon where a colon should have been. It was a digital typo, a simple, careless error that had created a logical loop, forcing the system to endlessly consume its own resources until it choked and died. It was an imperfection so subtle, so mundane, that only someone looking for a flawed blueprint, rather than a home invader, would ever have the patience or the perspective to find it. The team behind her leaned in, their faces still etched with doubt, completely blind to the simple, catastrophic truth on the screen. Her finger hovered over the keyboard, a fraction of an inch from the backspace key. The entire weight of the room, of the multi-billion-dollar corporation, seemed to press down on that single point. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and desperation. She could feel William's gaze on her, a silent, heavy pressure. This was the moment of truth. All the theory, all the late nights in the library, all the quiet confidence she had clung to like a life raft, it all came down to this. She took one last, steadying breath, pushing away the final whispers of doubt. With a quiet click that seemed to echo in the cavernous room, she deleted the semicolon, typed the correct colon, and pressed the Enter key. For a long, agonizing second, nothing changed. The red lights blinked on, mocking her. A sigh of collective disappointment began to form in the room. Then, a single monitor at the far end of the console flickered. It turned from a glaring, angry red to a soft, reassuring green. A moment later, another followed suit, then another and another, until a wave of green cascaded across the entire wall of monitors, a digital sunrise chasing away the night of failure. The piercing alarms ceased, replaced by the gentle, rhythmic hum of healthy servers. The tension in the room didn't just dissipate, it shattered like glass. The engineers, who moments before had been staring at her with condescending skepticism, now looked at the screens with wide-eyed, slack-jawed disbelief. They had not just witnessed a technical fix, they had witnessed a quiet miracle, a testament to the power of seeing what everyone else has been trained to ignore. William, his face pale and his composure completely gone, took a step forward. His voice, when it came, was barely a whisper, stripped of all its earlier arrogance. "How?" he began, then stopped, shaking his head in awe. "How did you see that?" He wasn't a CTO questioning an outsider. He was a man asking how she had performed magic. Maya slowly swiveled in the chair to face him. The adrenaline was finally fading, leaving behind a profound weariness that settled deep in her bones. She looked him directly in the eye, and for the first time, she let him see the full weight of the 10 months she had endured. "When you spend months feeling invisible," she said, her voice quiet but carrying the strength of absolute truth, "you learn to see the things everyone else overlooks." Her words hung in the air, a simple statement of fact that landed with the force of a profound revelation. In that instant, the worn courier uniform, the tired lines around her eyes, and the scuffed work boots all became irrelevant. They were just a costume she had been forced to wear. William saw past it all, and for the first time, he saw her, the brilliant, resilient, and deeply undervalued mind that had just single-handedly saved his career and his company. A wave of shame washed over him as he realized the colossal, systemic failure of vision that she represented. He and his entire industry were so busy looking for the right credentials and the right polished presentation that they had become blind to raw, undeniable talent when it was standing right in front of them, asking only for a chance. In front of the entire team, a group of highly paid experts who had been rendered useless by their own assumptions, William did not offer a handshake or a word of formal praise. Instead, he took a step forward and gently took the digital delivery tablet from Maya's hands. He walked over to a nearby desk and set it down with a quiet finality, as if he were putting away a relic from a past that no longer existed. He turned back to her, and the authority in his voice was now softened with a profound humility. "You're not delivering anything else," he said, his words echoing in the now silent room. "Starting tomorrow morning at 9, you have a desk here. On the main console, welcome to the team, engineer." Maya simply nodded, a single tear she hadn't realized was forming, tracing a path through the exhaustion on her face. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of a relief so deep it felt like she could finally breathe after 10 months underwater. The following weeks were a quiet revolution. Maya arrived not in a worn uniform but in her own clothes, her backpack now carrying a laptop instead of server parts. She proved that her performance during the crisis was not a fluke, but the baseline of her ability. She approached problems with a unique perspective, seeing the flawed blueprints where others only hunted for burglars. William, for his part, underwent a transformation that rippled through the entire corporate culture of Innovatech. He no longer looked at a resume and saw a list of credentials. He looked for the spark of a problem solver. He launched a new apprenticeship program, actively recruiting from community colleges and vocational schools, searching for the brilliant minds that, like Maya, had been rendered invisible by a system that valued polish over potential. He had learned the most expensive and valuable lesson of his career. Talent doesn't always come with the right packaging. 2 years later, the conference room adjacent to the tech floor was filled with the low hum of productive conversation. At the head of the table stood Maya, no longer a quiet observer, but a confident and respected project lead. She was guiding her team through the architecture of a new system, her explanations clear, concise, and insightful. Her final meeting of the day was an interview with a young candidate for an entry-level position. The young man was nervous, his suit was clearly borrowed, but as he spoke about his passion for coding, his eyes lit up with that familiar obsessive fire. He had no prestigious internship or Ivy League degree, only a portfolio of personal projects that showed a relentless curiosity. Maya smiled, a genuine, knowing smile. She saw past the cheap suit and the nervous stutter, recognizing the same invisible code of potential that had once been her only credential. The story of Maya and William isn't one of a dramatic corporate takeover or a quest for revenge. It is a quieter, more profound tale about the immense power of being seen. It's a reminder that competence is its own language and that true value is often hidden in plain sight, waiting for an opportunity to solve a problem that no one else can. Her victory wasn't loud, but it was absolute, rewriting not just a line of faulty code, but the unwritten rules of an entire company. It's a testament to the idea that a person's worth is not defined by the uniform they wear, but by the quiet dignity of their skill and the courage to speak up when it matters most. Sharing these journeys of quiet triumph is why we're here, and subscribing is the best way to ensure more stories like Maya's are seen and heard.